So I'm here today to introduce Jillian Gilchrist, who will offer an endorsement from NARAL America PACT. Am I correct?
Thank you, Gail. And thank you, Gail, for having us here in your home today. And Barbara, thank you for sponsoring. I am Jillian Gilchrist. I'm Executive Director of NARAL Pro-Choice Connecticut, your statewide pro-choice organization. And I want to recognize John Hartwell, who is a board member and also running for State Senate. He has received the NARAL Pro-Choice Connecticut PAC endorsement, and also Carl Bernstein running for State Representative. He also received the endorsement. I also want to recognize Callie Sullivan, who's in the room, and she is heading up the Reproductive Health Foundation of Connecticut, which is our newest branch. I am so pleased to be here in support of Congressman Jim Himes. He has received NARAL Pro-Choice America's endorsement and has also received 100% because of his voting record in D.C. Jim Himes has voted with us on a variety of bills, including there was a bill introduced to continue the ban on funding of abortions in Washington, D.C. Congressman Jim Himes voted against that. There was a bill introduced in Congress to prevent Planned Parenthood from receiving family planning funds. Congressman Jim Himes voted against that. And then there was the STUPAC amendment, which many of you are aware of, which would have prevented abortion coverage in the new healthcare exchange, and Congressman Jim Himes voted against that as well. Congressman Jim Himes is in good company in Connecticut. All of our Connecticut delegation has received 100%. That is not the case across the country. In fact, our anti-choice legislators still outnumber our pro-choice allies in the U.S. Congress. There are 203 anti-choice Congress members and only 185 pro-choice Congress members. And just want to tell you, in the year after anti-choice forces gained control of Congress in 1994, there were 37 separate floor votes on choice-related issues, the highest number of votes in NARAL America's history of counting votes. And if the House changes hands, anti-choice Rep. John Boehner could become the Speaker. Since getting elected in 1991, Boehner has voted 142 times on abortion and other reproductive rights issues, and has voted against us every single time. He even voted to defund programs that provide women access to birth control and cancer screenings. So choice is in jeopardy in this election, and Congressman Jim Himes, as was mentioned, is running against Dan DiVasella. So let me tell you the facts about Dan DiVasella. Compassionate Care for Rape Victims said that a sexual assault victim who presented to a hospital would be offered and provided emergency contraception. That bill was introduced in 2006 because Connecticut Sexual Assault Crisis Services had determined that across the state, religiously affiliated and non-religiously affiliated hospitals were not offering women emergency contraception. Maybe because of staff turnover, the policy just wasn't in place, and so it wasn't happening every single time a woman presented. So in order to get a standard practice of care in Connecticut hospitals, this bill was introduced. Of course, it became a religiously debated issue, and the second year, 2007, when the bill was introduced, the debates went on, and finally, a compromise was come to. The religious lobby met with pro-choice legislators, and the compromise that was come to was that Catholic hospitals could create a policy where they could have a third party distribute emergency contraception. The Catholic lobby agreed to that compromise, an amendment was tacked onto the bill, and that bill was voted on. Dan DiVasella was one of 3 senators to vote against that compromise bill. So he even didn't go with the Catholic lobby. If he's going to go against women in Connecticut, he's going to do the same in D.C. What we need are legislators and elected officials who understand that pro-choice is not a political bargaining chip. You can just say, actions speak louder than words, and we are talking about women's reproductive lives. And Congressman Jim Himes understands that, and so I am so proud to be here today to introduce NARAL Pro-Choice America PAC's endorsed candidate, Jim Himes.
It's a huge steps forward on behalf of women. And I'll tell you why I come at this with passion. Apart from it being the right and humane and just thing to do, Apart from it being the economically smart thing to do, many people were at the Women's Business Development breakfast yesterday, so you know how smart it is to empower women to start businesses. I grew up in a household with a single mom and 2 sisters, and I now live in one with a wife and 2 daughters. Even our black lab is a female. So it's a matter of self-preservation. Along the way, while we were dealing with this crisis, we passed a very important piece of legislation called the Lilly Ledbetter Act. Because women in this country are still paid 79 cents for doing the same job that a man gets paid $1 to do. And that is not right in this country. The Republicans opposed the Lilly Ledbetter Act. In health care reform, and it was a big, complicated, controversial bill. And look, there's things in it that are wonderful, and there's things in it that we're going to need to fix. But the fact is that women are heavily discriminated against in the health insurance market because you have the temerity to get pregnant and to get breast cancer. Being a woman was, until the passage of this reform, a pre-existing condition. In the private insurance market, women pay, on average, 45% more than men for insurance. That goes away. So whatever else you think about health care reform, and it's a tough one, it was a huge step forward for women. And just to paint the picture that Jillian painted, that's the kind of progress we need to keep going because it's at risk. And when the Stupak Amendment passed, it was a strange thing. You know, all of a sudden, Planned Parenthood and NARAL were all over this thing. They were in our offices. And, you know, I got the sense that it's not enough to wait for Stupak to draft an amendment. You know, you got to be in there all the time and always conscious of these issues because right now in the Congress, there's not a pro-choice majority. There is, frankly, not a pro-woman majority on this. We saw this in the vote on the Stupak Amendment. Jillian talked about my opponent and where he comes from and how he thinks about those things, so I'm not going to reiterate that, but I am going to say this. Of all the areas in which the choice on November 2nd is very, very clear, it is on women's issues. Jillian didn't mention this, but Dan DiBisello was also endorsed in his, I think, last race for Senate by the Connecticut Institute for Families, which is one of the most right-wing aggressive groups working against things like human rights for marriage equality, rights for the gay and lesbian community, and they are also anti-choice. They endorsed him. He filled out a questionnaire, which is not public, but which caused them to endorse him. And I promise you, if we could see that questionnaire, we would be able to refute this notion that he's out there saying I am pro-choice. The people in this room can win this race for me, but more importantly, can make sure that the progress that we have made for women doesn't get put into jeopardy with a Republican-controlled Congress or with Dan DiBisello working his magic on Capitol Hill. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your support. I'm glad that Jillian laid out the facts the way she did because really, this is a bellwether. If Fairfield County's representative in Congress is on Capitol Hill, and Connecticut congressman is on Capitol Hill, voting against choice, voting against women's issues, this country's in a lot of trouble. And you can fix that. You can fix that in the next 10 days. So thank you very much for being here, and I really, not just for who you are and what you do, but for what you're going to do in these next 10 days prior to the election. Thank you very much.